Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much for joining His Holiness Candramauli Swami daily call. Today, again, like yesterday, we had a good fortune of having Her Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji, and she's going to continue today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10 and verse 13 onwards. Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, pronouns.
So Mataji, should I share the screen or?
If I may share the screen, that would, yeah, so I can share the slides as well.
Okay, sure. I will give you just cool. So you can do Mataji now, please.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, verse 13. Sarve te nimishe rakshayastamanotrut chetasah vikshantah sneha sambaddha vichelustattra tatraha. Translation: all their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes, and they moved hither and thither in perplexity. So this is referring to the Pandavas and Draupadi and Subhadra and everyone else whom we read about yesterday in their anxiety over Krishna's departure from Hastinapur. Purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, Krishna is naturally attractive for all living beings because he is the chief eternal amongst all eternals. He alone is the maintainer of the many eternals. This is stated in the Katha Upanishad, and thus one can obtain permanent peace and prosperity by revival of one's eternal relation with him, now forgotten under the spell of Maya, the illusory energy of the Lord. Once this relation is slightly revived, the conditioned soul at once becomes freed from the illusion of material energy and becomes mad after the association of the Lord. This association is made possible not only by personal contact with the Lord, but also by association with his name, fame, form, and quality. Srimad Bhagavatam trains the conditioned soul to this stage of perfection by submissive hearing from the pure devotee. Om Gyantimirandhasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarane Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So just reading the translation once more. Translation, all their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes and they moved hither and thither in perplexity. So I'll stop sharing this and go to my slides. Okay. So going back again to the framework that we used yesterday with the VTE aims. Firstly, in terms of knowledge and understanding, I chose to discuss these 3 points. That what Prabhupada mentions here, Krishna is the chief eternal amongst all eternals. And he says he alone is the maintainer of the many eternals. And one can obtain permanent peace and prosperity by revival of one's eternal relation with him, now forgotten under the spell of Maya. So these first 2 sentences are actually from a verse, a very famous verse from the Katha Upanishad. Prabhupada says it here also. This is stated in the Katha Upanishad. It's a verse that Prabhupada loved to quote. He has quoted many, many times. I, in fact, did a Veda-based search this morning through the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, then some of Prabhupada's other prominent smaller books like Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, the Krishna book, and all of Prabhupada's audio transcripts and correspondences. So through these, I did a search for how many times Prabhupada has quoted this particular verse of the Katha Upanishad, and it yielded 448 hits. So that's 448 times that Prabhupada has quoted this verse in his lectures and his writings. And it's this very famous verse. Many of us would have heard of this. Nityo nityanam chetanash chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadhati kaman. And this verse is actually very, very significant in many ways. Firstly, because it is a verse from the Upanishad. And Upanishads generally are considered to be the domain of the Brahmavadis. The Brahmavadis, they love to study and cite from the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads because these are the texts that they primarily draw their knowledge and references from. So this verse is coming from an Upanishad, but at the same time, it very unequivocally, in an unmistakably clear way, it draws a distinction between the Jiva and the Supreme Lord. And so let's explore this further. So yeah, firstly, we can see here, as Prabhupada says, that he is the chief eternal amongst all eternals, and he alone is the maintainer of the many eternals. So as we can see in this verse, it says Nityo and Nityanam. So there is the Nitya, which is plural, which is the singular, sorry. Nitya is the singular and Nityanam is the plural. Then we have Chaitanash, which is the singular, and Chetananam, that is the plural. So there is one eternal Nitya, and there are many eternals, Nityanam. There's one Chetanash, a person with consciousness or cognizance, and there are many persons with consciousness and cognizance, Chetananam. And then again, Eko and Bahunam. Eko is one, and Bahunam means many. So there's a very clear distinction that's being talked about here. There is one eternal and there are many eternals. Both are eternals, but there is a distinction. Then there are two kinds of people who have consciousness and cognizance, but there is one and there are many. And then Eko and Bahunam, and then Yo Vidadhati Kaman. And what's the distinction between these two categories? It is that one eternal is maintaining Vidadhati Kaman all these many other eternals. That is the distinction. The many eternals are dependent upon, they are being supported by this one eternal. And so this very clearly encapsulates the ontology of God, of living entities, and the distinction between the living entities and matter. Because so the first point that we get here is that Nitya, God is eternal, and we find it supported, of course, in many scriptural references, like, Ishvara, Parama, Krishna, Sachidananda, Vigraha, Anadir, Adir, Govinda, Sarvakarana Karanam. Krishna is Anadi, he is beginningless. Then Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadi, Mananta Rupam, again the same thing. He is limitless, he is beginningless, he has no origin himself. He's the origin of everyone else, he's eternal. So God is eternal. That is one thing that we come to know. Then the next thing that we come to know is that we living entities are also eternal. There is Nitya, God, and Nityanam, the living entities. We are also eternal. And now this would not make sense unless we understand that we are not these bodies, but these souls. Because the bodies clearly are not eternal. So the statement would not make sense if we were these bodies, because we see everyone who is born, they die at some point. Our bodies are perishable. So if it is being said that the living entity is eternal, what does it mean? We see people dying all the time. So what does it mean that the living entity is eternal? So this statement proves in and of itself that we, the living entity, are distinct from our perishable bodies. So this is the second very important point that it makes. It distinguishes the spirit soul from the material body, because the spirit soul is eternal. And as Krishna says very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita, Natvevaham chatunasam natvam neme janadhipaha na chaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayamatah param. Never was there a time when I did not exist, God is eternal, nor you, that is Arjuna, nor all these kings. So you all are also eternal. Nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. God is eternal, all the living entities are eternal. They were always there and they will always continue to be there, to continue to exist. And then Krishna goes on to say, Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubhayorapi drishtontas, vanayos tattvadarshibhe. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance. And of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So the same point, that which is born, the material body is born, that is bound to die. That the material body dies, and we see that. But what is never born, which is the Atma and the Paramatma, for them there is no death either. What is never born never dies. Avinashi tu tadvidhi yena sarvam idam tatam vinashamapyayasyasya na kaschit kartumarhati. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. Antavanta ime deha nityasya yoktaha shariranaha anashino aprameyasya tasmadyudhyasva bharata. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharat. So clear distinction between the material body and the indestructible and eternal living entity. Another verse very famous from the Gita, Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nityah shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamani sharire. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So firstly, we have come to know God is eternal, then we living entities are also eternal. And the fact that we are eternal proves that we are different from our material bodies, which are clearly not eternal. And then this third most important point that it makes is that the one eternal is maintaining all the other eternals, and which shows that although both of us living entities and God are eternal, we are not non-different from God. We are not one with God. We are distinct from him. And Prabhupada makes this point very clearly in this Gita purport, where Prabhupada says, the Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living beings, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. So here we find this distinction, because otherwise it's very, in one sense, it's very logical to assume that if both of us are eternal, we are also eternal, God is eternal, both of us are unborn, both of us are imperishable, then that means I must be God. And that is what is the Mayavad theory, that the living entity is one with God. Temporarily, under the spell of illusion, the jiva has forgotten the fact that he is God. And once one overcomes that illusion, one again becomes God. So because if the nature is the same, then we must be the same. But here we find that no, there is a distinction, like the drop of ocean water and the ocean itself. They both have the same chemical composition, but there is a distinction between the entire ocean and a drop of the ocean. So, and that's why, as Prabhupada says, the Lord is eternally the maintainer in the jiva's condition as well as their liberated situations. It's not that after liberation, the jiva becomes the same as the Lord. No, the Lord continues to be the maintainer, and the jiva continues to be dependent on the Lord, even in the liberated situation. So as Prabhupada goes on to say, it is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. And therefore, that was Krishna's argument, that there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. And again, Prabhupada makes this point here, the Mayavad theory that after liberation, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya or illusion will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the supreme authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. That's why we see in this another very famous verse from the Gita, Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhutah Sanatanaha. The living entities, and Prabhupada's translation is just so precise over here. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. They are eternally Krishna's parts, but they are eternally fragmental parts. They are not non-different from Krishna. There is a simultaneous oneness because they are his parts, but there is also a distinction. They are fragmental parts. And Prabhupada elaborates in the purport, the living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatanaha. And that's why Prabhupada, we see he would always use this phrase part and parcel for the living entities. Part and parcel, it conveys the same meaning, that they are parts, but at the same time they are fragmented, part and parcel. There's a simultaneous oneness as well as distinction. And this is important to acknowledge, because otherwise, as Prabhupada points out, that because if we are to go with the Mayavad philosophy, that it is only under the spell of illusion that we have forgotten that we are God, and once we overcome that illusion, we will again become God, then we need to explain, how does God come under the sway of illusion in the first place? How did it even happen? Okay, now I'm an illusion. I'm actually God. Now I'm an illusion. And once I overcome illusion, I'll again become God. But if I was God, then how did I come under illusion anyway? And so we find this in, actually, I'm so sorry. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 379. It's a typing error over here. Sri Maitreya said, certain conditioned souls put forward the theory that the Supreme Brahman, or the personality of Godhead, is overcome by illusion or Maya. And at the same time, they maintain that he is unconditioned. This is against all logic. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 379. So it's the same thing. This does not make any sense. It's illogical. It's a fallacy. This argument is fallacious. So this definitely means that we are not God, because we come under Maya. And Maya is Krishna's servant. She is his eternal maid servant. Krishna does not come under Maya. Prabhupada also elaborates this in his Gita Purport to 212. He states, this statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual, but material. But even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Because Krishna not only says that the living entities are all individuals, he says even I am a separate individual. And Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. And if he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita would have, his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the 4 defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. So Prabhupada is using the same argument in a reverse way, that if we are all God, and God sometimes becomes illusioned by Maya and then again regains his original godhood, then the same would apply to Krishna. And if Krishna is an individual soul, just like other Jiva souls, then what is the value of listening to the Gita from him? The Gita would be just like any other product of human beings, marred by the 4 defects of human frailty, as Prabhupada puts it. So this proves that Krishna is infallible. That is why the Gita has value. Otherwise, what is the value anyway? So this this is the perfect Achintya Bhed philosophy that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has clarified for us in our Gaudiya Vaishnava theology of simultaneous oneness and difference, and why it becomes especially important and why it is stressed so much in our tradition, and why Srila Prabhupada also would never miss an opportunity to establish this again and again and refute the Mayavad conceptions, is because the concept of relationship arises only when we acknowledge that there is a distinction between Krishna and ourselves. Otherwise, where does the concept of a relationship with God arise from? If I am God myself, there is no question of having a relationship with God. So when we say we are Krishna's eternal servants, and our entire goal of life is to reestablish, to revive our eternal relationship with him and have loving exchanges with him, and we hear and read about other devotees having loving exchanges with Krishna. That is only possible when we recognize the philosophical fact that Krishna is an individual and we living entities are also individuals. We are all distinct persons. Then there is a possibility of an exchange, of reciprocation, of a relationship, which is the crux of the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology and the purpose of our lives to revive that relationship with Krishna. And so that brings us to our preaching application and Shastra Chakshusha combined, wherein Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that Krishna is naturally attractive for all living beings. Again, pointing to the same thing, that means Krishna is different, we are different, and Krishna is attractive to us, naturally attractive to us. We have a natural tendency to be attracted to Krishna. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, once this relation is slightly revived, the conditioned soul at once becomes freed from the illusion of material energy and becomes mad after the association of the Lord. So once this relation is even slightly revived, then the conditioned soul becomes mad after the association of the Lord. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, one can obtain permanent peace and prosperity by revival of one's eternal relation with him. So as that famous aphorism goes, Muktir hetva nitha rupam svarupena vyavasthite. Prabhupada would say the dharma of the living entity, the constitutional position of the living entity is to be established in one's eternal role as a servant of Krishna. And so that is how one obtains permanent peace and prosperity, because that is our intrinsic nature. And Prabhupada makes this very wonderful point here in Srimad Bhagavatam 4:12-42 purport in this regard, that the Mayavadi philosophers aspire to become one with the Supreme Lord, but a devotee surpasses that position. Not only does a devotee become one in quality with the Lord, but he sometimes becomes the father or mother or master of the Lord. Arjuna also, by his devotional service, made Lord Krishna his chariot driver. He ordered the Lord, put my chariot here, and the Lord executed his order. These are some examples of how a devotee can acquire the exalted position of conquering the unconquerable. This reminds me, actually, I'll share this Veda base for another very famous verse that actually Prabhupada used to quote, which is, just a moment. This is from the prayers of Lord Brahma after he stole Krishna's cowherd boyfriends. And okay, yeah. Very famous verse also. Prabhupada used to love quoting this a lot. Gyane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharitam bhavati vartam sthane sthitaha shrutigatam tanuvan manobhir ye prayasho jita jitopyasitais trilokyam. So this is a reference to that purport which Prabhupada, wherein Prabhupada says the devotee conquers the unconquerable. This is basically coming from this verse where it says Jita Jitopyasi Traistrilokyam. Krishna is Ajita, one who cannot be conquered. Here it says Ajita, oh unconquerable one, and Jita, even that unconquerable one, becomes conquered by the devotee. So the translation says it's Lord Brahma praying to Lord Krishna. He says, those who, even while remaining situated in their established social positions, throw away the process of speculative knowledge, and with their body, words, and mind, offer all respects to descriptions of your personality and activities, dedicating their lives to these narrations, which are vibrated by you personally and by your pure devotees, certainly conquer your lordship, although you are otherwise unconquerable by anyone within the three worlds. So this is the power of devotional service. There's a point which Prabhupada would make very often, that they want to be one with God. And in one sense, we can understand the appeal that this concept would hold for any living entity here in this material world, because After all, that is why we are here in this material world in the first place, because, as Prabhupada would put it, because of our desire to lord it over, because of our desire to imitate Krishna. So this philosophy that we are actually God and we can become God, it is very appealing, it's very attractive. But Prabhupada would point out that devotional service is actually giving us something even higher. Becoming God seems to be the highest thing that one could possibly achieve. But we learn from our bhakti theology that there is something even higher than that, and that is to become a devotee of the Lord. And that places the devotee in a position which is, in one sense, due to the loving relationship, the devotee is in a position where he is higher than God, and he conquers God, and God comes under the devotee's control. So better than being God is to become greater than God, and as paradoxical as it could sound. And we see that in all of Krishna's dealings with his devotees. Krishna's dealings with his devotees in Vrindavan, Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, the Damodar Leela, a very vivid demonstration of how Krishna comes under the control of his devotees. Krishna, the Acharyas point out that in the description of Damodar Leela, where it is described that Krishna is crying tears of fear, and he's rubbing his eyes and he's shaking in fear, those are, Krishna is not play acting at that time. Those are actually genuine tears. Krishna is genuinely afraid and he is genuinely crying in fear. And that is because of the power of Mother Yashoda's maternal love for Krishna. That love is so great that God himself forgets that he is God. God himself forgets his divinity, and he comes under the sway of that maternal love, and he is just her little child at that time. Krishna has no consciousness at that time that I am Bhagavan. Krishna just knows that I'm Mother Yashoda's child and I'm in trouble right now. And he's crying genuine tears. So that is the potency of devotional service. Prabhupada would also often point to that picture. There's a very beautiful BBD painting of Krishna holding Nanda Maharaj's shoes on his head. And he would often point to that as another example of how Krishna comes under the control of his devotees. Same with Arjuna, how Krishna agreed to become his charioteer. Before that, with Yudhishthira Maharaj, Krishna agreed to become their messenger. And we see that when Yudhishthira Maharaj conducted the Ashwamedha sacrifices, Krishna took the role of washing the feet of all the guests who were arriving, Yudhishthira Maharaj's guests. So that is the level of a devotee. That is the level. And going back to our slides, sorry. Therefore, as Prabhupada says here, that the Lord, Arjuna also, by his devotional service, made Lord Krishna his chariot driver. He ordered the Lord, put my chariot here, and the Lord executed his order. These are some examples of how a devotee can acquire the exalted position of conquering the unconquerable. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:12-42 purport. And then moving on to the personal application part. So this basically forms the basis for our, okay, just backtracking a moment. This forms the basis of our preaching as well as our worldview, the distinction between God and the living entity and the material nature. This basically puts the devotee in a position where he or she can literally see the entire world in its correct perspective, which is no mean feat. I mean, we have all these scientists who have been laboring hard since centuries, trying to get a hold, trying to get an understanding of what this world is about, what is the nature of the world. We have these, the theory of everything, which has been something that people have been very fascinated by, and trying to encapsulate the entire reality of the world into one theory or one formula, trying to formulate a theory of everything, something that would explain everything. Actually, this is Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. They give it to us in such simple terms. Everything that exists can be understood in these three simple points. There is God, Krishna, who is the absolute truth. everything in existence is his energy. At the same time, there is a simultaneous oneness and difference between the energy and the energetic. And so there is God, and there are two kinds of his energies. There's the living entity, the superior energy, and matter, the inferior energy. There is a distinction between matter and the living entity, and there is also a distinction between matter and living entities and God. But at the same time, they are all connected the way energy and energetic are always inseparably connected. So that literally, yes, it gives us the correct perspective about everything in existence. There is nothing that falls outside the purview of this framework. And of course, and there is also this practical application, which is that what do we make of this information? So what we make of this information is that now we know that our real identity is to serve that person with whom we are eternally connected. And that is Krishna. And the process is Bhakti Yoga. So going on to personal application, as Prabhupada again emphasizes this point, as in yesterday's verses, that association with the Lord is made possible not only by personal contact with the Lord, but also by association with his name, fame, form, and qualities. As Prabhupada also made this point yesterday, that there is association through Vapu, the physical association, but there is also association with Vani. And in Krishna's case, because he is absolute, so there is literally no difference between Krishna's name and form and qualities and pastimes and he himself. And so as soon as one associates with any of these things, then one is directly associating with Krishna. So that is the personal application part of this entire framework, this entire worldview that we are given by Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srimad Bhagavatam trains the conditioned soul to this stage of perfection by submissive hearing from the pure devotee. And so we are given further help in the form of, because, okay, so we are supposed to try to associate with the Lord through his name, fame, quality, and pastimes. But how do we know about that? And so that is through submissive hearing from the pure devotee. Krishna is unknowable. He is beyond the reach of our material senses. So how would we ever access information about him? How would we ever gain realization about him? And that is through people who have actually that association and that realization. And that is, we are given in the Srimad Bhagavatam narrations about devotees and by devotees who have personally associated with the Lord, who have personally spoken with the Lord, who have personally interacted with the Lord, and their dealings with the Lord are given to us in a ready-made form and passed down in an unbroken chain of disciplic succession to us through our previous acharyas and the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So in one sense, the process is made extremely easy for us. We not only have the most comprehensive, most detailed information, but then we also have it in a most authentic form passed down through the parampara. And all we have to do is to submissively hear from the pure devotee. And we get that ultimate perfection, which is rarely acquired even by the greatest of yogis and jnanis. So it's again a very powerful motivation to at least try to chalk out some time every day to hear about Krishna and read Srila Prabhupada's books, and like these classes, Maharaj's classes, these are such a wonderful opportunity for all of us to do exactly that. This is what we are gathering to do each day, and I myself so grateful to have come to know about these classes. I only came to know about them very, very recently, just 3-4 days ago. And yeah, these are such gatherings are such a treasure for all of us to be able to do exactly this thing. And as Bhagavatam 2nd Canto, Shukdeva Goswami says that with the rising and setting of the sun, the rising and setting of the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone except one who engages in hearing and chanting about the Lord, because that is the key to eternal life. So with every day and night, the lifespan of everyone is diminishing, but one who is associating with the eternal Lord through this eternal process of hearing and chanting about him in association with devotees, then we are also connecting with that eternality. And we are reviving that soul's potential to again become Satchid Ananda, the soul's true nature. And so, yes, it literally makes one immune to death, because it frees one from the cycle of repeated birth and death. and reinstates us in our original situation as a spirit soul, which is by nature, as we saw, which is by nature eternal. And reflecting on Prabhupada's mood and mission in this regard, one of the most prominent things is Prabhupada never misses a chance to refute Mayavad. We can see this here. And as we see in Prabhupada's Pranam Mantra, also Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyati Deshatarani. This was a very, very prominent feature of Prabhupada's teachings. Prabhupada was very emphatic about this. About this distinction, establishing this distinction between the living entity and God. We are not God, we are the servants of God. I remember there's this story that is told about how there was once a Mayavadi who came to Prabhupada and he gave him a stack of pamphlets about his philosophy and organization to Prabhupada to ostensibly to distribute to his disciples. And after that, Mayavadi left, and Prabhupada instructed his servant to distribute those pamphlets, one to each one of the disciples that were gathered in that room. And everyone was taken aback. Everyone was wondering what's going on. Why is Prabhupada asking these Mayavadi pamphlets to be distributed? And once every devotee had a Mayavadi pamphlet, and then there was some prasadam in a plate in Prabhupada's room, and then Prabhupada indicated that prasadam should be distributed to everyone and placed on those pamphlets to eat. That was all that Prabhupada thought it to be useful for. Just use it as a plate to eat prasadam and throw them away. So Prabhupada was very emphatic about refuting Mayavad. And Prabhupada's conviction that Krishna consciousness is the solution to everything. This also comes through very vividly in all of Prabhupada's teachings and writings, as we see here also. Prabhupada says that that Krishna is naturally attractive for all living beings, and one can obtain permanent peace and prosperity by revival of one's eternal relation with him. Prabhupada would make unequivocal statements like that because he was so convinced himself that this is really the key to attaining eternal peace and happiness for everyone. He had that absolute conviction, and that is why his teachings were so convincing for others as well. And I just wanted to read out this excerpt from the Nectar of Devotion, which again reflects the same thing by Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, the Nectar of Devotion teaches us the science of loving every one of the living entities perfectly by the easy method of loving Krishna. We have failed to create peace and harmony in human society, even by such great attempts as the United Nations, because we do not know the right method. Everyone knows well that when we eat something, or in other words, when we put foodstuffs in the stomach, the energy created by such action is immediately distributed throughout the whole body. Similarly, when we pour water on the root, the energy thus created is immediately distributed throughout the entirety of even the largest tree. It is not possible to water the tree part by part, nor is it possible to feed the different parts of the body separately. The Nectar of Devotion will teach us how to turn the one switch that will immediately brighten everything everywhere. One who does not know this method is missing the point of life. So yeah, the same thing. Of course, it needs to be clarified. It's worth noting that Prabhupada was not against the inventions of modern society. Prabhupada was a very strong advocate of Yukta Vairagya. He himself employed the latest technology, the latest amenities, the latest resources in Krishna's service. So he did not deny or he did not reject these things. But at the same time, his emphasis was to recognize what is the key ingredient, that these things in and of themselves cannot give us any peace and happiness, because we are the soul and these things are matter, and matter and soul are by nature incompatible. Matter cannot, intrinsically, it cannot satisfy the soul. So we use these things for our service, for maintaining the material body. The body is also made of matter, so we need material things to maintain the body. We employ material resources in Krishna's service because matter is also one of Krishna's energies. and he is the rightful owner of that energy. So that energy needs to be employed in his service. So Prabhupada did that, but he emphasized again and again that the key ingredient is to always remain mindful of the fact that Krishna is the source of our, Krishna is our best friend. He's the source. He's where we can find our true peace and happiness by reconnecting with him. And as Satsur Maharaj, he actually once recalls that Prabhupada instructed him to, in fact, write a book based on that Gita verse. I'll just share that verse. Just a second. Okay. Line 12 again. Moghasha mogha karmano mogha jnana vichetasah rakshasim asurim chaiva prakritim mohinim shritaha. Translation: those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So, moghasha, mogha karmano, mogha jnana. Their hopes, their activities, their jnana, their knowledge, all of these are failures. And Prabhupada actually once instructed Satsvarup Maharaj to write a book titled All Things Fail Without Krishna, based on this verse from the Gita. So that was Prabhupada's conviction, that Krishna is the ultimate solution to all our life's problems. He is the ultimate source of happiness and peace, as Krishna himself says, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati. That just, I'm sorry, I'll read to you the exact translation here. This Prabhupada's translations are. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. This was what Prabhupada used to call the peace formula, the ultimate key to attaining eternal peace and happiness. And that all stems from this original knowledge that yes, there is God and there's us, the living entities, who are different from matter, but also different from God. And our constitutional position is to act in a way that serves God's purpose. Our oneness lies in becoming one with God in terms of desires, in terms of interest. So when our interest and God's interest are aligned, when the part of the machine serves the entire machine, like a screw in the machine, it falls off, then the screw has no value. But it is meant to play a certain role in that overall machine. And when it's reinstated in that original position, then that screw has very great value. So similarly, when we are reinstated in that original position, when we become one with Krishna in terms of our interest, in terms of our desires, that our desires and Krishna's desires are the same. Our desires also just to serve Krishna's interest and Krishna's desires, then by that oneness, we attain eternal peace and happiness. And oneness among us, among ourselves also. And that is the way to attain true unity among ourselves. As Prabhupada would say that universal brotherhood is impossible to achieve without recognition of universal fatherhood. So true unity, even among us living entities, happens when we recognize that central point of all of us being servants of that one God. And so, yes, thank you so much. This is where I would like to conclude.
So thank you, Mataji, for nicely explaining the distinction between the God, human being, material nature. You also emphasized that God is eternal, our soul is also eternal, but not this body. And we are definitely distinct from God. Yeah. And Krishna consciousness is the solution for everything. and especially devotional service and association with his name, fame, form, quality is key to get his love. And yes, submissive hearing also you mentioned from pure devotee is really, really important. And so thank you very much. There's
Thank you,
such
Prabhuji.
nice, so many nice messages, one after another. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Uh, if you have any questions, comments, or realizations, I would really request you to unmute yourself. If you want me to read, you can type in your chat window and I can read on your behalf. And also request if you can switch on your videos. Thank you. So Mataji, why the time devotee ask questions? I have one question at my end.
Sure.
I think this is a very common question, but still it's very important. Many times devotees and other people ask in various satsangs. See that we eternally were part of Krishna Lok.
Right.
And in Krishna Lok, only those souls can enter who are free from lust, anger, greed, and all these like vices. Yeah. And pure in the quantity and quality. But somehow we had this desire to have a separation, like enjoy. I would not say separation, enjoy. That's why we are in this material world. So my question is, why, like being in that pure state, Jiva can have that kind of desire because of that, we all are actually part of this material energy now.
Right, right. I'll just, it just brings to mind one, something that Prabhupada writes in the Gita. Just give me a moment, Prabhuji, I'll look it up.
Sure,
Okay, I'm so sorry, I'm unable to find that exact reference right now, but I'll just paraphrase it. I'll share the reference on WhatsApp, Prabhuji, when I find it. But basically, Prabhupada makes this point that Krishna, he is a Vibhu, he is all powerful, and as Jivas, we are Anu, we are just by nature, we are tiny in existence, and also like Krishna has these three energies, right? So there is the internal energy, which is Krishna's own Lagini potency. That's just his internal energy. Then there's the external energy, which is matter. And we happen to be the marginal potency. And marginal, by definition, it is kind of on the borderline between the internal and external. So there is always, from what I've understood, Prabhupada would say, there's always this possibility because you're kind of on the coast. So there is this possibility of leaning to one side or the other. And in one sense, factually speaking, there is no Maya because everything is Krishna's energy. Krishna constitutes everything in existence. Everything is energy. What constitutes Maya is basically forgetfulness of our relationship with Krishna. And as soon as that forgetfulness is eradicated, we again become, we again get out of Maya, even while we are living in this material world. And that is why we see the pure devotees who are living in this material world, even though they are physically situated here, actually speaking, they're not part of this world, because their consciousness has and their remembrance has been completely revived, and so they are no longer part of this material world. And even their bodies, like Prabhupada would give the example of an iron rod in fire, that it becomes non-different from fire once it has been in the fire long enough. So because matter is also, after all, it's Krishna's energy, so once it is used in Krishna's energy, then it also becomes spiritual. There does not remain any matter any longer. So the concept of matter or Maya only exists so long as there is forgetfulness of that relationship with Krishna. Otherwise, anyway, everything is spiritual because everything is Krishna's energy. The Mahamaya and Yogamaya, they are both the same. Mahamaya is an expansion of Yogamaya. But it's just that when we forget that it is Krishna to whom all these things belong, and it is Krishna to whom we are related, then that is basically what causes our suffering and our being in illusion. And that is because we have this inherent tendency to do so because we are Anu, because we are tiny, and because we happen to be the marginal potency. So this tendency is there to, yes, to look the other way, like Krishna Bahirmukha Jiva. So when the jiva becomes Bahirmukha, he has that tendency to do so. And when he does so, then there is Maya. And as soon as he is no longer Bahirmukha, then there is no Maya, because there is no Maya anyway. It's all Krishna's energy. So that is, yeah. I'll try to look that up and share the exact reference.
No, thank you, Mataji. But my question was more like, see, it's mentioned that once Jiva reach to the Krishna lok, they will not come back. Yeah.
Yes,
that's mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. So point
Yeah,
is that we originally were there only. Yeah, like that's our origin. So why we landed in this place? Like my question was not like Maya in terms of Maya. Like my question was like why we are landing actually in this world, like in this space. Like we are all part of this, and from Golok or like from the Krishna lok, we don't need to come back.
Yes, yes. I guess the explanation Prabhupada would give was just that, yes, we all have free will, and Krishna respects that free will. And so, and because we are marginal potency, sometimes we do tend to use our free will in this way of choosing to turn away from Krishna, try to enjoy independently of Krishna. But yes, I'm aware also of the fact that this is a topic which has drawn a lot of discussion, and I acknowledge that I'm not very knowledgeable in all those nuances of the Shastric discussion that has taken place in our devotee circles in this regard. So unfortunately, yes, I am not very aware of that, but the simple thing that I know, just based on what Prabhupada usually says in his lectures and purports, is that we have free will. Krishna does not choose to interfere with that free will. And using it, we sometimes do choose to turn away from Krishna to try to enjoy independently of him. And Krishna allows that also because, again, there is no meaning of a relationship that is forced. And so he allows us to do that, but he keeps watch on us by accompanying us as Paramatma. He keeps trying to take us back by appearing as various incarnations, sending his devotees, giving the scriptures. And when we do, of our own volition, we choose to turn back to him after becoming exhausted by our course of life in this material world, then yes, Krishna is much, much more eager than us to take us back. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not that knowledgeable with regards to the intricacies of this discussion.
No, you nicely
Thank you,
Thank you, Mother.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
So Hare Krishna, dear devotees, if you have any questions, any comments or realizations, please do unmute yourself. You can raise your hand now. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say thank you for that very wonderful, interesting lecture.
Thank you. Thank you
very
so much. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Srimati Mataji has also mentioned in the chat, thank you Mataji for the nice class. Sridevi Mataji also saying very scholarly, brilliant class. However, she unfortunately having
Oh.
cough, so cannot speak. So,
Hope you get well soon, Mataji.
so looks like Mataji, no further questions, comments, but absolutely
Sure.
nice class, really so many nice messages with so many references. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
Prabhuji. Thank you.
really valuable time. Really appreciate Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you to Maharaj and all of you for having me here and giving me this opportunity. I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
Hare Krishna, thank you for wonderful class.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Means a lot. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your
Hare Krishna.
encouragement.
Srila
Hare
Prabhupada ki
Thank
jai, Guru
Thank you.
Maharaj ki jai,
Jai.
Her Grace Gopika Radhika Mataji ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai.
Professional Jai.
So Mataji, I will close this call now.
Sure,
Thank you.
sure, Prabhuji.